Hi, my name is Vyushti. Welcome back to our educational series about LHS. Today, I will be interviewing Justin, Jerry, and Jasmine, three LHS students who took a creative approach to helping our community understand this complex new building project. And they built an AI chatbot to answer questions, connect data from different sources, and make the information more accessible to all. So let's hear from the students behind that innovation, what inspired them, how they built it, and what they learned from bringing technology and civic engagement together. So first off, I want to ask you guys, why did you build the chatbot in the first place?
So, we built the chatbot to help our community better understand the proposed new high school project. In 2023, through the Youth STEAM initiative, we had actually partnered with the Lexington Observer and used the same framework in our earlier Lex Budget chatbot. We wanted to make sure residents could access reliable and unbiased information to make informed decisions. Creating this chatbot was our way to contribute directly to the community.
Hey, I can definitely see that you executed that vision, and I saw the platform myself, and it looked great. So, next question, could you actually share the chatbot and explain how it works?
Mhm. So I can give us a demo of the features of our chatbot and what's there right now. So this is the landing page for our chatbot, and you can see the URL here is chat.usteaminitiative.org if you want to try it out yourself at home. And so here is the main page for our chatbot. You can enter your question yourself by just typing in the box, or you can click one of the sample questions that we have. And what will happen is that will appear here in the text box, and the chatbot will come back with a response, as well as linking to the documents that it used to answer that question. And so you can click back to those links if you want to find out more. And another thing that our chatbot does is that after you ask your question, it'll also provide follow-up questions that are related to your original question, in case you want to continue that chain of thought. So for example, the first question I asked was, how much will the new high school building project cost? And then a related question to that would be, how will it be funded? And so these questions are generated by AI every time you ask a question. And so then new follow-up questions will be provided based on the previous question that you asked. And depending on what you thought about what the chatbot responded, you can give it feedback as well. Just kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, as well as any text feedback you have, and you can submit that to us. So if there's anything that you find to be incorrect, or if you think that could be improved, then you can tell us about that in this field here. And we have a couple other pages on our website. So here is the About Us page. This is a quick summary of the history of our project, as well as who is involved with the project right now. Here in our data set, this is a list of all documents that we've ever used to assist the chatbot in answering queries. So any information that the chatbot is using is likely to be going from one of these sources that we've listed here. And this is essentially just to as a vote of confidence, we want to be transparent with our data set, so that way the community can ensure that we're pulling from the most official as well as the most updated sources. And then finally, as a disclaimer, of course, since this is an AI tool, there is always going to be a risk of hallucination or error. So we do want to make sure that residents are using this at their own discretion, and they should always be verifying any information that the chatbot gives out to them. One of the key things that we think our chatbot can help with is providing the information to you much more quickly than a human could find it themselves. But of course, it is still up to the humans to see if they want to check back to the documents and determine whether or not that information was correct or not.
I'm gonna be honest here, your platform looks really official and professional, and I appreciate the effort that you guys going the extra mile put in, where it's like you have follow-up questions so you can continue that chain of curiosity. I think it kind of shows that it's thought-provoking and not only meant to answer basic questions, but truly help residents understand the true extent of your intentions. So now I want to ask, how did you build a chatbot and what tools or data sources did you use? And this is kind of building off of the data set that you already showed, but I just want to understand how you really made this happen.
Mhm. So there's two kind of aspects to this, I suppose. The first would be on the technical side, what kind of things we did in the actual programming of the chatbot, and I'll address that first. So I'm sure many of you guys at home have used ChatGPT or other similar generative AI tools. And the way that our chatbot works is pretty similar. In fact, our base model is actually a model from OpenAI, but we augmented the framework to make it especially good at answering municipal budget questions, particularly by supplying it with these, Lexington specific documents. And so the framework we used for our chatbot actually combines these two pre-existing frameworks for large language models. And these two frameworks are called RAG and React. So the first framework, which is RAG, stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And the idea behind this is that you can supply a base large language model with documents outside of its training data set, and it'll be able to utilize those external sources of information when it's generating its response. So in our case, we took this base model from OpenAI, which obviously has no clue about anything relating to Lexington's budgeting system or this new high school project. But then we supplied it with thousands and thousands of pages of documents that are actually pertaining to this new high school project, and as well as Lexington's budgeting system in general. And so by supplying these new documents, we are essentially telling the chatbot that these are the sources of information that we want you to use when you're actually answering the user. So it's not just pulling random numbers, it's actually grounding itself into the documents that we provided. And all of these documents are, of course, going to be publicly available documents that were on the town website. And then the other framework that I mentioned is React, and this stands for reasoning and acting, so React. And the idea behind this framework is that this helps our chatbot to ensure that it's not making any mistakes in its work. It's kind of like a thinking framework. We essentially establish this sort of thinking process by which the chatbot can check its own work and make sure that it's not making any mistakes in its response. It can reread its own response to revise them as it feels necessary. So that way, when the final response actually comes out to the user, it's going to be as accurate as possible, and those numbers are going to be as accurate as possible. And so those are kind of the major components on the development side of things. And of course, we also had to determine, for example, what sort of documents we wanted to use. And so throughout the 2-year duration of this project, as Jasmine mentioned, this was started originally back in December of 2023, but we've had collaborations with lots of different community stakeholders. So for example, one of the groups that we worked with earlier in the project was the Lexington Appropriations Committee, and they kind of helped us to better understand the budgeting system for us, and then we could apply that knowledge into the chatbot. And they also helped us, figure out what kind of documents would be good and all sorts of stuff. So we really wanted to make sure that the information we were giving out was authoritative and it was up to date. So by getting involved with the community, they were able to tell us what sorts of things were the most accurate, and that's what we used in our chatbot.
Wow, 2 years is a lot of time to spend on a project like this, and I can see that you were very thorough and that your big picture thinking kind of broke things down to be thorough and, like you said, authoritative in every aspect so you could be as accurate and helpful as possible. So I want to ask, besides the fact that you literally made a chatbot, what did you learn from this experience, both technically and civically?
Yeah, so we learned a lot of things. I'll start with like the technical learnings. So we learned that like despite LLMs being like really powerful nowadays, we learned that like they're really ineffective without like accurate sourced information. And this is where the grounding process that Jerry mentioned earlier comes in. So our chatbot takes like thousands of PDF pages and it chunks the text for like its retrieval system. And this was like a very like core technical challenge of this project, and it taught us the importance of like data integrity and source verification in AI applications, because without a retrieval system, AI can make up a bunch of random numbers that have no grounding whatsoever. And it shows like the importance of having a good retrieval system. So we also learned the importance of iterative development for projects, because while developing this project, we had a lot of communications with members of our town. So we did a lot of testing and we had some feedback from the community. And through this, we refined how well our chatbot was able to respond to queries. And additionally, because budget documents are pretty hard to understand, we designed this chatbot to like have very like clear and deep responses that an everyday user, even if they're not experienced in like the field of town budget, can understand. So civically, we learned how to use technology to foster democratic engagement, because it showed how technology can foster civic engagement through like interactions with the chatbot. And through this, citizens can actually get a better understanding of how the funds in our town are being used. Because previously, if they wanted to find information regarding town budget, they'd have to go through the documents, which are very hard to understand. It can be really hard to navigate them and find exactly what you need to find. And yeah, and we also learned the importance of having neutrality in our information because while this like project is for the school building project, it's created with neutrality in mind because we can't have a bias in a chatbot that is used to source information to people in the town who might be curious about it. So I'd say like finally we learned how to like bridge gaps between complex projects and the public because we saw inaccessible information can lead to public skepticism. And this project bridges this gap because instead of having to go through these really hard to access, really hard to understand documents, the users can simply just query the chatbot. And if they're not sure if the chatbot's responses are reliable, they can go to the provided sources. And I think this is just really like a way to foster civic engagement while also like creating more trust between our town's government and the people.
In a growing age of AI, it's nice to see it being responsibly used and like how you tried to streamline efficiency, clarity, and accuracy, and also tried to keep a neutral tone so residents could make up their own mind using your platform as an informational source. But enough about the platform you created. I want to hear about you guys as LHS students. I want to ask what it feels like to learn at our current school, how it's affected your learning experience, and how you felt about it as, students.
I guess I can start off with my experience. So I'm currently a senior at LHS. And I think throughout pretty much all 4 years of my high school experience, I've definitely felt like the school has been really, really great with in terms of the academic opportunities it provides, in terms of extracurricular opportunities, clubs, athletics, any of that sort of stuff. If you want to do it, the school probably has it. This is definitely one of the schools that has the most opportunities, I'd say. And I think that's something that's really great. And of course, the curriculum itself is also going to be challenging, it's going to be rigorous, and it's definitely much more in depth than some other schools might go into. But I think the school definitely has its limitations, especially in terms of spacing and design. So, for example, during lunchtime, it's always a struggle to find a seat with your friends, whether it be in the commons, or sometimes you may have to go outside if there's no seating there. And also just because of the way that the school is laid out. Let's say if you want to go to a class from one end of the main building to one end of the math building, you're pretty unlikely to make that on time unless pretty much running. So I think there are definitely some ways in which the school's design could be improved. So even though it does feel like it can be cramped at times, at the same time, it can also feel like it's a lot of distance that you have to cover. It's almost like paradoxically, you could say. Uh, but I definitely think that the educational side of things is going very, very well. But I do think that on the design side, there could be some improvements.
Just adding a bit to like what Jerry said about lunch and like the cafeteria. Some of my friends have to wait 25 minutes in the lunch line, and the whole lunch period is only 30 minutes. So they only have 5 minutes to eat at the end of it. So I think just probably adding more like lunch options would be a good choice. Also, another thing I like to bring up is like the temperature. I've noticed that in across different buildings, like there's really little temperature regulation. Like in one class, I'm sweating, and then I'll walk to my next class and I'll have to put on my jacket again.
Yeah, I get it. Our building's pretty hot and cold. There's a lot to like about it, but it's also kind of cold sometimes, literally. I mean, in some of my classes, the air conditioning's not regulated at all. And today in my Italian class, it felt like the windows were open. And also, like, I understand the lunch hassle. Like, I've had to be strategic about getting my spot at lunch a few times. And also, I know about not getting enough time to eat. So, it's really great to hear your experiences as students and not only creators of this wonderful, helpful platform. So thank you so much for your time, and your effort is much appreciated because it's really helpful to the community at large.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think just to conclude, I would like to end by saying, as students, we have a very different perspective on this new high school project than many of the adults in the community or the other members of our community. And so I do want to emphasize that no matter how you feel or what your stance is on the project, we do believe that this chatbot that we've created can be a useful tool for you, not as something that is attempting to persuade you to one side or another, but more so as a way to quickly gather accurate information. And so, regardless of whether you're pro or anti for the project, we do hope that you find our tool to be something that you can use and that the community can agree upon.
And with that, I think we're going to come to an end. Thank you.